Good evening. Today I'd like to talk to you a bit about some of the key clauses in the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution provides a framework for our federal government. It also includes a supremacy clause and contracts clause. And an objective in this chapter is that we understand the power of the federal government to regulate business as established in the U.S. Constitution. Also, we will talk about a few of the major amendments to the U.S. Constitution and some of the basic protections provided by the Bill of Rights. The U.S. Constitution provides the framework for federal government. It originally had 7 articles and 27 amendments have been made to it. It does influence the regulation of business activities. For example, Amendment 1 that we'll discuss in this lecture deals a lot with freedom of speech, for example. So, if the federal government tells your business that they are going to regulate how you advertise or where you can put a billboard, or what kind of label you can put on the bottle of beer that your business produces, that may be affected by the U.S. Constitution and freedom of speech. And there are many examples of this. In addition, sometimes the federal government may do things that involve, taking your property, for example. That could be influenced by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. Federalism is a term you need to know, and it is established in the Constitution. Federalism recognizes that each level of government has a distinct role to play. Congress must not weaken the ability of state government to function in the federal system, and state government may not limit the power of federal government. This is all established in the U.S. Constitution. There is a clause in the Constitution called the Supremacy Clause that says the Constitution is supreme, the supreme law of the land, and also that federal law is supreme over state law. And we have talked about that previously, about how the hierarchy of laws exists and how the Constitution is the highest form of law and the federal law is supreme over state law. And the word that describes this is preemption. When a federal law preempts a subject, then any state law that tries to regulate the same is unconstitutional. Preemption applies to federal statutes and rules and regulations of federal administrative agencies, which preempt or override any conflicting state laws. So state law is invalid if it conflicts with federal law. Now, one of the clauses in the Constitution you do need to review is the Commerce Clause. It provides the federal government the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations, among the several states, and with the Indian tribes. Now, state and local governments can regulate these activities if they're conducted entirely within the state's boundaries and they don't affect interstate commerce. But states cannot impede interstate commerce or commerce that affects business outside of the state. And that's pretty broadly defined. The federal government will look at not just business that crosses state lines, but business or people who are engaged in activities that affect business in other states. Now, another clause to look at is the Contract Clause. States cannot enact laws that impact rights and duties under existing contracts. So, unless there's some sort of emergency in a very unusual situation, if you and I have a contract here in Arkansas that exists, the state then can't enact a law in most cases that impact our rights under that contract. On the other hand, this does not apply to the federal government, and also keep in mind that state laws passed during emergency situations can be approved. Now, some amendments to the Constitution. Well, the first 10 amendments are called the Bill of Rights, and these are protections for persons against exercise of powers by the federal government. Now, the basic constitutional rights are not absolute. You do need to remember that. So, for example, you do have freedom of speech rights, but yet there can be some regulation of your speech. So, for example, if the local government has a great reason for saying that we don't want billboards in certain locations, then they may be able to do that on the basis of public safety. Your right to freedom of speech still exists, but it may be regulated if it's regulated in a reasonable manner. An extended limitation on constitutional guarantee depends on the nature of the competing public policy. So let me give you an example. Let me find this example here. It's on the website called Art on Trial. So let me find that quickly. Just to give you an idea of what I'm trying to talk about here. Let's see, Art on Trial. I've got it here and I will show you a couple of things about it. Here we go. All right, thanks for your patience. The Art on Trial website has a lot of examples that you can see. But you can look, for example, at this tattoo on the screen. And this was done by an artist. And the question is a tattoo art and is it speech? And the answer is yes. Now, this tattoo artist did this in South Carolina, and he was unhappy because he got in trouble. Since he was not a licensed physician, his tattoo work was violating federal law. I'm sorry, not federal law, state law in South Carolina. So the question is, can South Carolina stop this person from expressing himself by giving people tattoos? And is the law that says that only licensed physicians entitled to the right to give tattoos constitutional? Or does it violate the First Amendment freedom of speech? And in this particular case, the court did say, your rights to free speech are not unlimited. And if there's a competing public policy, such as health concerns that South Carolina had about infections and such that could happen if you have a tattoo or receive a tattoo from someone who is not licensed physician, then unfortunately this fellow lost his case, the tattoo artist, because the court said, yes, there is freedom of speech, but we are going to regulate that because there's a public policy concern or a health concern. So that's a good example that I just wanted to show you briefly to give you an idea about that issue. All right, thank you very much. I do hope you will take a look, and let me show you these briefly. I had a few of these different things that would be on in the U.S. Constitution. Let me blow these up a little bit and we'll talk for a moment about them before I go away, or in this video. Here's the Commerce Clause. Regulate commerce with foreign nations among the several states and with the Indian tribes. Very important and often broadly construed, so that means this is a power of Congress to do this. Another one that I want you to take a quick look at is the Supremacy Clause and review. Constitution and the law of the United States and all treaties shall be the supreme law of the land. All right, very important clause. And then the Bill of Rights. And the one I want to point out here, well, there's a couple, but one is the First Amendment, which says Congress shall make no law respecting establishment of religion, prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech. First Amendment. Another critical one is the Due Process Clause, which is contained in the 5th and 14th Amendment, and basically says no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Very important. Also, the 14th Amendment is here, and particularly important there is, again, due process clause is there, which is dealing this time with the states cannot deprive someone of due process of law. Or the last thing is deny to any person the equal protection of the laws. And we will talk about some more of these clauses in the next video. Thank you.